Hey guys, it's Bet here. Welcome back to part 2 of my site guide for Escape from Tarkov. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, there will be a link in the description to watch part 1, which covers the sites available from the Tier 1 and Tier 2 vendors. This part 2 of the guide is going to be covering the sites that are available from the Tier 3 and the Tier 4 vendors. Again, all of the sites are going to be shown on a AK-74N just for consistency's sake, as well as giving you some information on which sites can mount, have like additional view pictures and stuff like that. So let's get into it. Alright, next up we have the 553, which is available from Skier Tier 3. It is a one-piece that costs just over 20k rubles at 20,763. It mounts on the Picatinny rail system and has a magnification of 1. This is similar to the other holographic sites that we've looked at, but it is slightly larger, so it will not fit on some of the medium and the medium-sized sites, which will fit the other holographics. But the site picture is fairly similar to the XP S3-0. I'm not really sure why you would buy. I guess you could buy this site because being available from Skier, it's available in rubles as opposed to the USD. But it's sort of being larger on your gun, especially with that sort of mount out the front, just makes it harder to fit on more rail systems. So I'm not totally partial to this site. I think there are other sites that are of equivalent size and equivalent cost that have slightly better site picture than this one. Up next we have the P1X42. This is available at Skier Tier 3. It is a one-piece site that fits on the Picatinny rails, and it has it's available for a cost of 13,516 rubles. It has a magnification of just ×1, and it will fit on some of the smaller rails, including the rail that is on the shrimp pistol, if you get that rail system. However, it will not fit on the angled grip, or the angled sight mount that is sold by Peacekeeper. We can take a look at the sight picture. I'm not a huge fan of this first one that's basically like a T with a little bit missing in the middle. I feel like it doesn't have enough missing to really sort of tell me the center. However, the next one I feel like is a lot better with the circle. So it has the circle and then sort of the 3 dashes around it. That's a pretty decent sight picture. Then it has just a plain red dot, and then it goes back. So it has those 3 different sight pictures. My personal favorite is the second one, and it has a little bit of a sort of a green tinge to the lens in the frame. But I feel like the housing and stuff is pretty minimal. It's not so big on the gun, and it's fairly cheap, being sort of below the 15k mark for rubles. There are sites that I prefer to this site, but I know that some people that this is their favorite site, so that's available at Skier Tier 3 for those people that are interested. Alright, up next we have the OKP-7 with the dovetail mount. This is similar to the OKP-7 without the mount that's sold at Skier Tier 2, however this is sold at Skier Tier 3. It is a one-piece sight that costs 14,310 rubles, and it is connected by the dovetail mount. So you can see on the side there that it connects to the dovetail mount on the side of the AK-74N. So it would also connect to other guns that have the dovetail mount sights, such as the OPSKS, the N variants of the AKs, the AK-74N and the AKMN. As well as the AS-VAL and the VSS. One gun that it will not attach to that has the dovetail sight on the side, the dovetail mount on the side, is the AKS-74UN. For some reason it will not connect to this. I believe it has a lower profile than some of the other dovetail mount sights, and thus isn't really compatible with sort of the larger dust cover on the AKS-74UN. But I'm not sure if that's by design or not. But just be forewarned, if you're running an AKS-74UN, this sight will not fit on it, even though the dovetail mount is on the side of the gun. This is one of my favorite sights because it's a one piece, it's fairly cheap, and it's easy to put on the AKs, as well as I really enjoy this sight picture. Unlike the OKP-7 that fits on the Picatinny rail, this dove mount one has a completely different sight picture. I don't know why, or if you're supposed to be able to like switch between them or switch out the lens or anything like that. But right now the sight picture of these two is different, and the other discerning difference between the two of them is the dovetail mount versus the rail mount. This one obviously has the two lines and the green chevron there in the middle. I just find this a lot easier, even though it's sort of slightly offset from the iron sights. I just find this a lot easier to find my sight picture with and find my target with, as opposed to the other one, which, if you remember, had the one red dot and then the two sort of red circles around it. I just find that sight a lot more cluttered than this sight. I also enjoy running this sight at night. I feel like for whatever reason it's easier for me to find the green colored sight at night as opposed to the red colored sight, but that could just be personal preference. So yeah, this one gets a big thumbs up for me, although the only downside is that you can't run it on an M4 or anything like that, because you need the dovetail sight in order for it to be mounted. But you can see as I try to go through different sight pictures, that my gun sort of shakes like my guy's clicking the button, but I'm stuck with just the green sight. So I don't know if that's, again, I don't know if that's by design and I should be able to switch to the three sort of red dot circles, or if it's always going to be like this. But it'd be nice to have the rail mounted sight also be able to have this sight picture. Alright, next up we have the DR1/4X. This is available at Peacekeeper Tier 3. It is a one-piece sight that fits on the Picatinny rail for a cost of 387 USD. This is a large sight, so you will need the Tactical Tula 1000 mount if you want to mount it to the AKs. It won't fit on some of the smaller rails that you can put on here. And what's special about this sight is it actually has a couple of different ways that you can switch around how you view this sight. So if we bring it up to look through it, this is the default 4X sight. So we're looking at 4 times the magnification right now, and if I use Alt to change the sight picture, I can change it to basically the same sight picture, except now I only have 1 times magnification, and then again back to 4. So you can see that that's denoted by not only the magnification changing, but also the cross at the center of the screen changes from red to black. When I was using this sight earlier on factory, it was bugged, so it would not give the correct sight picture. So I'm not sure if that red dot is by design or if that's something they had to do to fix the bug. But you can also switch to iron sights on top of this by hitting Control and switching to the iron sights and then back. And the only thing I don't like about this is I feel like the iron sights on the top are sort of unnecessary when you can change between ×4 and ×1 just going through the sights on the, going through the magnification on the gun. So I feel like I'd always use the ×1 magnification in the actual sight as opposed to switching to the irons on top. But if you get used to using other sights such as the hammer, where you're going in between 2 sights, like the one on top, then you're using Control to do that as opposed to Alt to change the magnification. So I haven't really been using this sight much myself, just because the button presses are different, and I'm worried that I'm going to switch to the iron sight as opposed to switching to the correct magnification that I want to use. Another hang-up on this sight is if you have the canted sight on the front, the 45-degree angle mounted sight, that you have to cycle through the irons first and then to the mounted sight and then back to the original sight. So it thinks there's 3 different sight pictures on the gun, even though you're trying to only use 2. So that's another hang-up that I would have about using this sight over something like the hammer or even the PSO scope. Alright, up next we have the hammer sight, or the HAMR sight. This is sold at Peacekeeper Tier 3. This is a one-piece sight with sort of an exception, which is that if you want to use the little delta point on top of this, you need to buy the delta point sight and add it to the hammer. It doesn't come with a delta point already there, even though it comes with the mount for it. So the cost without the delta point sight is $315 US, but if you buy the delta point sight, it bumps it up to $433 US. But you will need the delta sight on top if you want a proper sight picture when you switch between the two different sights. This is a large sight, so you will need a full-sized rail to put it on, and it has a 4 times magnification, and if you put the delta point sight on top, then it also has a 1 times magnification that you can switch to. So you can see we can zoom in. This is just a consistent sight picture, so it sort of has that horseshoe over the sort of the distance markers. And if we do control right click, we can switch up to the delta point and back to the main sight and back to the delta point. I quite like the actual hammer part of this. The 4 times scope I feel like is very clear and fairly easy to use, although it gives you sort of a narrow field of view. I feel like most of the magnified scopes do that. But again, I'm not a big fan of the delta point on top. I suppose if you're only using it for like extreme close quarters just to have a better sight picture than hip firing, it is usable in that aspect, but I prefer some of the more expensive scopes, or even running a PSO scope with a canted sight on the front would be preferable for me personally. Alright, up next we're getting into some of the Tier 4 sights now, starting with Skier Tier 4. This is a 2-piece sight that is known as the 3-24x42. It is a sniper scope basically, so I wouldn't typically be running it on something like an AK-74N, but just for the sake of consistency, that's the gun we're using throughout this whole video. You will also need a mount for it that is the 30 millimeter scope mount that Peacekeeper also sells, that Skier also sells at Tier 4, making it a 2-piece sight for a cost of 64,243 rubles, and allowing you to mount it to a rail. I'm not sure the exact magnification on this, but it's very substantial. So I think it's a 8 times or a 12 times magnification scope. So this is like a full-on sniper rifle scope. One thing that's special about this sight is that you can buy a separate mount for it. I believe Peacekeeper sells this at Tier 4, that actually not only holds the sight but also allows you to put a delta point on top of it. So I can show you how that looks like now in the menu system. I'll pull that up here. So this is the JP 30 millimeter, and if I drag over the delta point sight, you can see it turns green, and I'm able to add it to the scope. So then I can switch between the extreme magnification scope and up to the delta point, and back to the extreme magnification scope. This mount is different than the one that's sold by Skier, because Skiers will not have the mount on top for the delta point. But I'll show you why you'd want to buy this for this magnification for this sight for Skier, as opposed to running it on the one that Peacekeeper sells, because there's a problem when you try to use the delta point on the sight that Peacekeeper sells. Alright, finally we have the last of sort of the traditional like red dot and holographic sights. This is the last one we're going to be looking at that's only a ×1 magnification. This is the UH-1. It is available at Skier Tier 4, and it is a 1-piece costing 20,790 rubles, and it's mounted to the rail systems. It is a large sight, so you will need the full sort of sized rail in order to mount it. It won't be fitting on any pistols or on any of the canted sights. And it gives a pretty nice sight picture. It's a little bulky on the gun, but I sort of like this sort of dot inside the larger circle. And I feel like it doesn't really have that much of a tint to the glass. And I feel like it's fairly easy to use this sight. Although it is quite expensive compared to some of the other sights that are less than 15K. And also you have to wait to be Skier Tier 4, which is basically you have to complete almost all of Skier's tasks and be level 30 with him to get to it. But if you're watching a lot of the sort of the high-level streamers, this seems like the sight that they like to run. It doesn't have any alternative sight pictures, so so if you don't like this sight picture, it's the only option. But I feel like overall it's a pretty nice sight, even though it is quite large on the gun. Alright, up next we have the FF3-12. This is another sort of more sniper type scope, although this one is only a one piece from Skier Tier 4. It costs 71,069 rubles. It mounts on the rail system, and I believe it's another like 8 or 12 times magnification scope, so you can see it aims in quite a bit there. This one gives a little bit clearer sight picture than some of the other ones we were looking at, so it might be a little bit less magnified, but I haven't really seen anything that tells me exactly how magnified it is, and I haven't really played around with trying to have like, alright, this one's a 6 and this one's a 8 and this one's a 12 by having them all sort of back to back to back. But again, that's what the sight picture looks like. It is an extremely expensive sight, costing over 70k rubles. And just the way the game works right now for like how long it takes to, like how quick the time to kill is, using a sniper, even if it's a semi-auto sniper, using a sight like this isn't super practical in the current meta. So I don't know if using any of these sights is all that practical, especially because they're only really available at endgame. But I thought I would show you guys sort of these high-tier sights anyway. So we'll move on to the next one. Alright, next up we have the Bravo 4, which is a Peacekeeper Tier 4 item. It is a one-piece magnified optic for a cost of 517 USD. It is mountable on the Picatinny rail system and has a magnification of 4. And it also has a small rail on top, which for the purposes of this demonstration I have mounted a fast fire weaver to. So we can take a look at the sight picture now. This is one of my favorite sight pictures for the magnified optics, even though the cost is substantially more than some of the other items. But I feel like the Bravo gives a really clear sight picture, and I also feel like you get slightly more field of view, as well as it says that in the description of the optic, that it is the highest sort of field of view at the 4 times magnification. And you can use control right click again to switch to the sight on top, and you can mount a couple of different sights on top. I've just gone for this one just for showing that that's one of the choices that you can mount on top, because this is my personal choice. But it's up to you which sort of sight you want to put on top of sort of the smaller red dot sight choices. I believe you could put an aim point up there. You could put a delta point up there. It's up to personal preference, because it's a rail system and not a specific type of connection. Like the hammer is only the delta point is the only option for putting it up there, because it's its own mounting system. Alright, up next we're going to talk about the TA11D for Peacekeeper Tier 4. This is a 2-piece sight, so it has a base to make it work on the Picatinny rail, and it has a cost for the 2 pieces of 373 US dollars. This is a magnified optic with 4 times magnification, as well as it being sort of a large sized scope, so you need the full-size rail to sort of put it on there. And in many other games, I believe this is referred to as the ACOG scope. So I was expecting a little more than this sight picture. Isn't really what I was expecting. I'm not a huge fan of the triangular shaped crosshairs, I guess if you want to say, the middle of the sight picture being shaped like a triangle like that. I also feel like, for whatever reason, I feel like I see less around the actual middle of the sight picture than I do with some of the other scopes. So even though the ACOG is like a sort of an iconic sight, I feel like it's not as it's not really what I was expecting in this particular game. But if you like this sight picture, then this could be a good sight for you, as well as I'm going to show you in the next 2 sights here. There's a ×1 magnified optic sight, that like a no magnified optic sight that you can put on the top of this with a special attachment system. So I'll show you that in a sec when we get to that other sight. Alright, the final of sort of the big sniper scopes that we're going to look at is the 6.5-20 times 50. It is Peacekeeper Tier 4. It is 2 pieces because you need sort of the scope mount that it's in order to mount it on the gun. And it has a cost of $1,173 US, making it an extremely expensive sight. It is a rail-mounted optic, and it has a substantial magnification, as you can see now. This is not dissimilar to the one that Skier sells at Tier 4. However, the dial on the top of the scope that you can see right now, as I flip it over, is quite substantial. So when I was showing you the scope mount before that put the delta point on top, and I can pull that up now, just moving a little things around, that this scope completely, even though it allows you to use it with that optic, it doesn't really work properly in order to facilitate you actually being able to use the delta point. So you can see I've switched it over there to the one with the delta point on the top, and if I look at the gun, you can see the delta point is there, but when I go to look down the delta point, the adjustment of the scope goes right in the way. So just be wary of that, if you especially because both of these parts are available at Peacekeeper Tier 4, and the mount I was using before without the delta point on top is significantly cheaper, but it's Peacekeeper Tier 2 to get that point, to have them both in USD, and that's actually when I said the cost of the $1173 US, I was quoting the cheaper scope, so just be mindful of that. If you plan to use a magnified optic like this and also have the delta point on top, just do a quick check to make sure that you can actually see the delta point in an offline raid before making that commitment. Alright, finally we're going back sort of to the ACOG, but this time we're focusing on the sight that is on top of it. This has a couple of different mounts. One you can get and mount it directly to a rail. The other you can get and mount it to the top of the ACOG scope like this, so we can take a look at its sight picture now. It's very similar to the delta point. This is called the RMR sight. It is available from Peacekeeper Tier 4. It is a 2-piece sight because you need the mount to put it on the Picatinny rail. If you buy the mount and the sight, not the one that goes on the ACOG, but the one that goes on the rail, the collective cost will be 148 USD. It also is obviously a magnification of 1, and it can be, and if you want the ACOG mount, it's 68 USD instead of 18 for the mount that fits on the Picatinny rail. You can also purchase a P226 mount that goes directly on the back of the P226 pistol for 18 USD, or you can buy a lifted mount for 18 USD that lifts the sight up a little bit, similar to the aim point we looked at the beginning, the red dot inside of sort of the little circular housing that had the spacer, and that's, I believe, for something like the MP5, where the iron sights would get in the way of using a smaller, lower profile red dot sight. And yeah, that basically brings us to the end. There is one more sight, but I'm going to fire up a raid and talk a little bit about that extra, because it is different than most of these other sights, and to give you a sort of a different sight picture of that one. It's also an incredibly expensive sight, so that's something to look forward to. We'll talk about that in a second. Alright, so the final scope we're going to be talking about is the Reaper IR. This is a Skier Tier 4 scope, and it is the only scope that he sells that is priced out in euros instead of rubles. It is a 2-piece sight because you need the mount for it to fit it on the Picatinny rail, but it has a cost of 8,645 euros, making it close to a 1 million ruble scope. It has a magnification, I think, somewhere between ×2 and ×4. And it is a infrared scope, which makes it different from all the other scopes in the game. I believe it was added this sort of last major content patch. It has a black hot mode or a white hot mode. As you can see, I can switch between those. but it doesn't have anything to change the magnification as of yet. It also says I'm walking around, I'm going to see, I have NPCs in this this raid, so I'm going to see if I can show you what they look like on here. Hopefully they don't kill me first. But it says that it can also be used as a monocular, similar to the night vision, but I haven't gotten that to be able to work yet. So I believe this might be the only scope that can be used on the gun as well as on a monocular, similar to the way the night vision is used, but I haven't gotten that able to work yet. But you can see sort of on the top of the thing, it looks like there's a mount that should be able to hook up with that, but I'm not sure if that feature is in the game yet. Let me see if I can find some scavs to give you guys a sight picture, and then that'll be basically the end of the video. As I'm walking around, I'm sort of going to do my sign off because it might take me a while to find the scavs. Oh, there's one. So you can see that's him, white hot. Oh, he hit me. Oh, he blacked out my leg in one hit. And also the body will continue to glow white, or if I change so you can see black hot, white hot. I didn't bring any meds with me, so now my leg's blacked out. That's why we're doing this in an offline raid. If you enjoyed this video, sort of going through the sites and talking about what they look like and stuff like that, I feel like this is something hopefully that was helpful to you as buying the site to sort of find out what it looks like on the gun or whether you can use it on the gun is something that takes a lot of money to do in the game, and you're already spending enough losing gear when you're figuring out the game in raids and things like that. So yeah, if you found this content helpful, please give the video a like. If you want more content like this in the future, remember to subscribe. And until next time, guys, keep doing the best with what you got.